For a long time, I believed rich women had something I didn't. More luck, more connections, more opportunities. Until I realized that their real edge was never about what they had, but about what they did, quietly, every single day. These weren't obvious habits or popular advice. They were internal choices, small and consistent decisions that, when added up, created a life completely different from the norm. When I started spending time with these women, observing and learning from them, something shifted in me. It wasn't instant, but it was irreversible. Slowly, the way I thought, acted, and showed up in the world began to change. And with that, so did my life. Money started flowing differently. My choices became clearer, and my sense of control grew stronger. These habits aren't glamorous or widely shared. They're quiet, strategic, and deeply transformative. And today, they are the foundation I stand on. If you want to understand the 12 secret habits that changed everything for me, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick with me. Because the first one is already going to shift how you see your own life. Habit number 1. They treat money as an extension of their identity, not a matter of chance. The first shock I had when spending time around wealthy women was realizing they didn't talk about money like it was distant, difficult, or unstable. To them, money was a direct reflection of who they were, not a random event that happened when you get lucky. That perspective completely changed how I saw myself, and as a result, how I made money. I remember a simple, almost casual conversation, when one of them said, "I never ask myself if I'll have money. I ask who I need to become to sustain my next level." That echoed in my head for days. Until then, I always asked how to make more. They asked who to become. From that moment, I started watching my own behavior. I realized I was acting like someone waiting for money to arrive, not like someone who knew it was coming. I changed my posture, my decisions, my speech, even how I structured my days. Gradually, my identity shifted, and money followed. Rich women don't chase money. They build an identity where money feels safe to stay. Comment below, "I am the environment where money thrives." That statement begins to align your identity with the reality you want to live in. Habit number 2. They decide fast and adjust along the way. One of the things that struck me most when observing wealthy women was how quickly they made decisions. Not because they had all the answers, but because they understood something essential. Waiting for total certainty is expensive. While most people freeze up trying to avoid mistakes, they move forward knowing that adjustments are part of the process. I clearly remember a moment when one of them made a decision that seemed risky to me. I asked if she wasn't afraid of making a mistake. She calmly replied, "Mistakes are part of the cost of growth. What I'm no longer willing to pay is the price of indecision." That hit me hard. I'd spent years stuck, not because I lacked ability, but because I overanalyzed everything. When I started applying this habit, everything changed. I began making decisions more clearly, even without having all the answers. I accepted opportunities before I felt totally ready, adjusted strategies along the way, and stopped punishing myself for not getting it perfect on the first try. The result was immediate. More momentum, more opportunities, and a sense of control I had never felt before. Rich women don't confuse caution with fear. They know quick decisions build momentum, and momentum creates money, growth, and authority. Comment below, "I decide and trust the adjustment." Ainur, that affirmation gets you out of waiting and into intentional action. Habit number 3. They manage their energy before trying to manage outcomes. One of the quietest and most powerful secrets of wealthy women is how they take care of their own energy. Before thinking about goals, numbers, or strategies, they check in on how they're feeling, because they know results are a direct reflection of their internal state. When energy is messy, money is too. When energy is aligned, everything flows more naturally. I realized this on a trip, watching a wildly successful woman in a chaotic environment. While everyone around was stressed, rushed, and complaining, she remained calm, centered, almost untouchable. Not once did she raise her voice, rush, or show any signs of anxiety. When I asked how she managed to stay so calm, her answer was simple. "I don't negotiate my energy. If I lose that, I lose everything." Up to that point, I thought success required exhaustion, that being constantly busy meant progress. But spending time with her showed me the opposite. Rich women protect their energy the same way they protect their wealth. They know when to say no, when to step back, when to rest, and when to act. They don't waste energy on drama, guilt, or comparison. When I started applying this, I noticed quick changes. My mind felt clearer, my decisions firmer, and my opportunities more aligned. Money started to come with less effort, not because I was doing more, but because I was fully present in what I was doing. Wealthy women understand. Disorganized energy leads to unstable results. Aligned energy creates consistency. Maybe at some point while listening to these habits, you felt a discomfort that's hard to explain. Not because something is wrong, but because, even though you're evolving internally, there's still an area of your life that makes you feel insecure. Money. It's exhausting trying to grow emotionally, evolve as a woman, step into your power, and still carry that silent fear of not having enough, of being dependent, of not being able to support your own life in peace. That weight doesn't show up in conversations, but it influences every decision. It makes you settle for less, shrink yourself, delay your dreams, and live constantly on alert. And the most frustrating part? No one ever taught you how to deal with this in a light, healthy way. You were taught to work, to save out of fear, to survive, but not to build safety, clarity, and financial peace. Without that foundation, any growth feels shaky. You move forward, but always feel like it could all collapse at any moment. That's exactly why I created the Wealth Code, a guide designed to transform your relationship with money from the inside out, in a simple, accessible, and conscious way. It's not just about making more. It's about feeling safe, confident, and free to choose your own path without guilt or fear. It's about stopping the survival mode and starting to support the life you're building. If you feel like you've already grown too much to keep living with this silent insecurity, the link to the Wealth Code is in the first pinned comment. Habit number 4. They master silence and speak only when there's something to gain. One of the most underrated and most powerful habits of wealthy women is how they relate to silence. They don't over-explain. They don't justify themselves constantly, and they don't feel the need to fill every space with words. While many people speak to be noticed, they observe to understand, and that changes everything. I noticed this in meetings where, instinctively, I felt the urge to speak to prove my competence. Meanwhile, highly successful women would stay silent, listening intently. When they did speak, it was precise, direct, and strategic. No fluff, no anxiety, just presence. And interestingly, when they spoke, everyone listened. Over time, I understood what was happening. Their silence wasn't insecurity, it was control. They knew that those who talk too much give away power. Those who explain too much lose position. Those who react constantly become predictable. Silence, when used with intention, creates authority. When I started practicing this, something changed instantly. I stopped justifying my decisions, stopped responding impulsively, and began choosing my words with intention. My presence shifted. People started respecting me more, not because I spoke louder, but because I spoke less and better. Rich women know that well-used silence protects energy, strategy, and reputation. They don't waste words where there's no return. Comment below. My silence is strategic. That affirmation reinforces the habit of someone who understands that presence doesn't need noise. Habit number 5. They put themselves first, before everything and everyone. One of the hardest and most transformative hidden habits I learned from wealthy women was realizing they don't put themselves last. They don't live trying to please, rescue, or carry everything on their own. They understand that if they're not okay, nothing around them works properly. And that's not selfishness. It's emotional and financial intelligence. I remember a conversation where one of them turned down an important commitment because she was tired. In my mind, that seemed irresponsible. But her answer was simple. If I burn out today, I pay the price tomorrow. That sentence changed the way I saw boundaries. I used to say yes out of fear of disappointing, fear of seeming difficult, fear of missing out. And ironically, the more I erased myself, the less valued I felt. When I started prioritizing myself, something interesting happened. The more I said no, the more respect I received. The more I protected my time, the more seriously I was taken. The more I cared for my energy, the clearer my decisions became, and the more aligned my opportunities were. Wealthy women know the world mirrors how you treat yourself. If you make yourself the last option, you'll be treated like one. If you honor yourself, the world adjusts. Prioritizing yourself doesn't mean distancing from others. It means getting closer to your own power. Comment, I am my priority. This affirmation reinforces the habit that supports a prosperous and balanced life. Habit number 6. They build security before seeking comfort. A very clear pattern among wealthy women is how they approach comfort. Contrary to what many people think, they don't use money to numb life. They use it to build security. While most people chase instant pleasure, they focus on long-term stability. And that choice changes everything. I noticed it by observing simple decisions. They didn't buy impulsively to ease emotions. They didn't spend to impress. They didn't use money as an escape valve. Instead, they directed resources to build a foundation: savings, structure, predictability. When I asked if they didn't feel like enjoying life more, I heard something I never forgot. Comfort without security turns into anxiety. That made instant sense. I had lived through phases where I was earning more, but sleeping worse. Money came in, but didn't stay. There was pleasure, but no peace. When I shifted my focus from spending to feel something, to spending to build something, my relationship with money changed completely. Peace came before luxury. Wealthy women understand that true comfort doesn't lie in what you buy, but in what you secure. Financial security doesn't limit freedom, it creates it. It's what allows conscious choices, guilt-free breaks, and firm decisions. This habit changes everything because it pulls you out of the emotional cycle and puts you in control. When you build security first, money stops being a source of fear and becomes a quiet ally. Comment: I choose security over comfort. This affirmation strengthens the foundation that sustains lasting wealth. Habit number 7. They choose environments that expand them, not just ones that comfort them. One of the quietest, yet most impactful shifts I noticed in wealthy women was how they choose where and with whom they spend their time. They don't just surround themselves with people who understand them, they seek out people who expand them. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes it's downright unsettling, but it's intentional. I realized this when I started feeling too big for some rooms and too small for others. At first I thought it was arrogance. Then I understood. It was growth. Wealthy women don't stay stuck in places where they have to shrink themselves to fit in. They choose the discomfort of growth over the safety of stagnation. I remember being at an event where I felt completely out of place. The conversations were deeper, the references unfamiliar, the goals much bigger. My first instinct was to leave, but I stayed. I listened. I learned. That experience showed me where I needed to go and who I needed to become. Environments shape decisions. Decisions shape outcomes. Wealthy women know this and choose wisely where they place their presence. They understand that growing sometimes means leaving behind spaces where you felt safe but weren't evolving. When I started changing my environments, my goals changed. My references changed. My standards changed. And naturally, my financial life followed. Comment: I choose environments that expand me. This affirmation reinforces the habit of someone ready to grow, even when it's scary. Habit number 8. They learn to receive without guilt and without shrinking themselves. One of the most delicate and most liberating habits of wealthy women is how they receive. They receive money, compliments, opportunities, and help without apologizing for it. They don't downplay themselves to seem humble, nor do they feel guilty for having more than others. They understand that receiving is a skill, not a privilege. I noticed this in simple situations. When someone complimented a wealthy woman, she didn't downplay it, didn't justify, didn't shrink the achievement. She just said thank you. When an opportunity came up, she accepted it without overly explaining why she deserved it. That shocked me, because I had been taught to tone everything down: the success, the shine, the recognition, as if receiving fully was somehow wrong. When I started paying attention to myself, I realized how often I blocked the flow because of discomfort. I'd reject help, lower prices, turn down invitations, all to avoid seeming too much. And without realizing it, I was teaching the world to offer me less. It was only when I started receiving with ease that my life began to shift. Receiving became natural, not a threat. Wealthy women know that those who don't know how to receive also don't know how to sustain. Receiving without guilt strengthens self-esteem, stabilizes energy, and keeps the flow open. It's not arrogance, it's maturity. Comment: I receive with ease. This affirmation helps reprogram your relationship with worthiness and abundance. Habit number 9. They think long-term, even when no one is watching. One of the biggest mindset shifts I observed in wealthy women was realizing that they live a few steps ahead of the present. While most people react to the now, the monthly bill, the week's urgency, the emotion of the day, they make decisions based on who they want to be 5, 10, 20 years from now. They're not anxious about the future, but they're not trapped by the immediate either. I remember asking one of them why she turned down an opportunity that seemed too good to pass up. Her answer was straightforward: this solves today, but it gets in the way tomorrow. That completely changed how I made decisions. Until then, I chose based on quick relief, not solid construction. And I paid the price later, with exhaustion, frustration, and the constant feeling of starting from scratch. When I started thinking long-term, my life slowed down at first. I said no more often, became more strategic, skipped tempting shortcuts. But over time, something powerful happened. My decisions started to align, my results became more consistent, and my peace of mind grew. I didn't have to rush anymore. I was building. Wealthy women understand that wealth isn't about momentary speed, it's about staying power. They don't sacrifice the future to soothe the present. Thinking long-term is a quiet habit that separates those who grow from those who just stay busy. Comment: I think beyond now. This affirmation anchors your mind in the construction of wealth that doesn't crumble with time. Habit number 10. They build wealth without needing to prove anything to anyone. One of the most freeing habits I learned from wealthy women was realizing they don't live to impress. They don't buy to show off, don't work to prove a point, don't speak to convince. They live to uphold their own truth, and that completely transforms their relationship with money, time, and energy. I clearly remember a moment when someone questioned one of these women about a financial decision. Instead of explaining, she just smiled and said, "It makes sense to me." And that sentence held a kind of confidence I had never felt before. I, on the other hand, used to spend my life justifying choices, trying to validate my decisions to people who didn't even pay my bills. When I started letting go of that need for approval, something powerful happened. I stopped spending to look successful. I stopped accepting work that didn't represent me just to be seen. I stopped competing. And ironically, that's when my financial life started to fall into place. Money stopped slipping away through anxiety and started staying through awareness. Wealthy women know that trying to prove yourself to the world is expensive. They'd rather invest their energy into building something solid than keeping up appearances. And that choice leads to a quiet, but extremely stable, kind of wealth. When you no longer need to prove yourself, you make better decisions. And better decisions create a better life. Comment: I don't need to prove myself. This affirmation reinforces the inner confidence that sustains true prosperity. Habit number 11. They make hard choices early to live lightly later. One of the most striking differences between wealthy women and most people is their willingness to face discomfort early on. They don't avoid tough decisions, uncomfortable conversations, or necessary changes. Quite the opposite. They understand that postponing costs far more than acting. The price of now is always cheaper than the price of later. I noticed this when I observed how they handled choices I tended to avoid. While I delayed ending cycles, changing strategies, or saying no out of fear of short-term discomfort, they acted with clarity. One of them said something that stuck with me. "I'd rather go through a hard month than regret it for years." That sentence completely reshaped my thinking. When I started applying this habit, my life oddly became lighter. Not because it got easier, but because it stopped dragging on. Closing what wasn't working, adjusting paths, and owning up to responsibilities took courage at first, but it brought peace afterward. And interestingly, that peace had a direct impact on my financial life. Less waste, fewer impulsive decisions, more focus on what really mattered. Wealthy women know that avoiding discomfort is a silent trap. They'd rather deal with it early, even if it hurts, than carry unnecessary weight for years. This habit builds clarity, stability, and a deep sense of control over your own life. Hard choices made early build a simpler life later. Comment: I choose what's hard now to live lightly later. This affirmation reinforces the maturity that sustains prosperous decision-making. Habit number 12. They trust themselves even when the path isn't clear. The final habit, and perhaps the most powerful, that I learned from wealthy women is the quiet confidence they have in themselves. It's not arrogance. It's not blind certainty. It's a confidence built through practice, rooted in the experience of having gotten back up before. They don't need to see the whole path to take the next step. They know clarity comes with movement. I realized this when I found myself frozen before a big decision. I wanted guarantees, signs, confirmations. Meanwhile, a woman I admired kept moving forward, even without all the answers. When I asked how she felt so confident, her response was simple: "I trust that I'll know how to handle whatever comes." That changed everything for me. Until then, I believed confidence had to come before action. But they showed me the opposite. Confidence is born after you act, make mistakes, learn, and keep going. That's why they move while others wait. Not because they know everything, but because they trust their ability to adapt. When I started practicing this habit, my life gained flow. I stopped demanding perfection from myself and began trusting more in my emotional intelligence, intuition, and experience. As a result, my decisions became lighter and my outcomes more consistent. Wealthy women don't need to control everything to feel safe. They trust that no matter what happens, they'll know how to pivot. And that trust creates a powerful magnetism. Comment: I trust myself. This affirmation seals the habit that sustains all the others. These 12 habits aren't shortcuts or magic secrets. They're conscious choices, repeated quietly, that build a solid, prosperous, and aligned life. Treating money as identity, deciding fast, protecting energy, mastering silence, prioritizing yourself, building security, choosing expansive environments, receiving without guilt, thinking long-term, not needing to prove yourself, facing hard things early, trusting yourself. None of this only transforms your finances. It transforms the whole woman. And when the woman changes, everything changes with her. If this video resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, "I'm ready to live these habits." Because wealth begins the moment you decide to act like the woman you've always known you could be.